So I've brushed off the Arcanist and I am going into MIC to take it out for a spin. I'm sure everyone knows by this point what the role of a wizard is on this first boss usually. Generally I've been running the Thorn, but the Arcanist seems to do the trick pretty well as well. This Scorpion has got much more squishy than it was before. I'm sure there's been quite a few tanks who are getting obliterated because the DPS have killed the Scorpion. And the boss goes into rage mode where he starts one-shotting him. Very unpleasant. If you keep watching this video though, there is a little trick you can use to save yourself from that unpleasant fate. Notice I'm generally avoiding AoE damaging abilities on the spiders, which is again to just try and not kill the Scorpion. Side note, Ray of Frost is really good on both the Snake Lady and the Scorpion. And another side note, if you control the snake during this phase, it will start moving, so you're best off just leaving it alone if it hasn't started moving already. You'll see the Scorpion flying off and getting yeeted occasionally. That is because we have got a fighter tank who's using Bull Rush, which I highly recommend as well. It did form part of my build for the no healer run when I was tanking. The Eclipse line is also very useful to throw at the start of an article, because that will blast the Scorpion away from the DPS and hopefully reduce the amount of damage it can take and stop all the damaging stuff going on the Scorp. I'm not entirely sure why they've made this Scorp so much squishier. I initially assumed it was so that they could actually be killed quicker at the end of the match, but it looks like they may be intending for us to get a bit more creative with the mechanics. Another very weird thing about the Scorp is that he will always home in on the boss, or whoever has the aggro for the boss, it seems. On the PlayStation at least. Apparently it's not the same on the other platforms, but every time that Scorpion gets knocked away, he will just keep on going back to the boss. As you can see, the Scorpion is now getting dangerously low on HP. And we will, well, you'll see, we're going to start trying to shift it where we want him. But it is difficult when he stays so tight on the boss. This snake also seems to be hitting a lot harder. Don't know if that's another thing they've done. Here we go. Oh, nearly. And with a little coordination with the tank. Shout out to El Padrino, who did a great job here. Yeah, I've been trying. No, let me... Okay. There we go. Bull Rush. Push. Tangle and hold. Freeze him up. Let the snake come in. And there we go. Just enough HP to survive a little bit longer. Which looks like it may be the mechanic that they were intending, I don't know, but it certainly makes it a bit more interesting. But also much more difficult to do without a wizard, so yeah, I don't know what the thought process was there. Side note for those who don't know, these tend to stay immune to damage if you don't stop controlling them for a little while.
Catch you there.
There we go, first boss done, Arcanist, very nice. Second boss is a bit more Arcanist friendly. I have already done a mechanics video, but I will try to explain it a bit more here as well. So these mirrors will not activate until the boss gets to 90%, so you're safe until then, and it will always start with those two blasts down the side.
That's right.
And then it will always switch to the two blasts across the other side next, and it will keep on switching like that until around 35%, where there will be a brief pause, and then the triple mirrors will start activating. If you can see how I'm positioned at this point, I am trying to position myself so I can easily bounce back and forth without having to go in the middle. Obviously the middle is safe, but you do get those stacks, so it's not ideal to stay in there too long. And it should be switching over right about now. Usually we'll wait for a safe, or when we anticipate a safe spot with a decent bit of time so that we can throw our artifacts off. And once we get to this point where 3 mirrors are activated, try to keep 2 mirrors in view all time. Obviously, if these 2 mirrors activate, that means the safe spot is somewhere behind me. And it's just very easily predictable that way. So there we see, one of them isn't lit up, that means this is the safe spot. And it's never the same safe spot twice, so that can also inform you where's going to be the safe place to go. You've got to be a bit careful with this guy. Sometimes he will do a kind of lag jump into a stun lock, especially if you're tanking. He can do a double stun on you, and it can be quite difficult to get away from him. Been caught out a few times on the tank with that. You'll see the DPS here, apart from myself using green scale bowmen. This is because, well, for one thing, they do quite a lot of damage for a companion, but the main reason we use a green scale over others that might do slightly more damage is because they have a massive range. And back when we were doing MGR, when we were training, we noticed that the melee companions have a tendency to disengage if you get too far away from the enemy. So now at this point we are starting into fast mirrors, where it's just going to alternate and almost feels like it's overlapping. It isn't, you just need to move fast. So when it goes through one sequence and takes a little break, it will then come back with the same sequence. It always starts with the top being safe, but it will then add an additional sequence of mirrors, which is also quite easy to be caught out by if you're only expecting a certain number. The general idea is to wait for that little lull, that safe spot, and then go arties and try and burn it down as fast as possible. The artifacts here were slightly mistimed. It's usually better to do it as it's going into the starfall mechanic, but such is life. but relatively smooth in the end. We usually just defeat ourselves there because it saves a lot of time and it allows us to switch into our AoE builds. You cannot do any damage to these mobs from outside of that square, but they can damage you, so watch out for that. This is basically just a cleanup operation. If it's lagging too hard, sometimes you'll get a little the door will activate before all the mobs are dead. At one point we thought it might be triggered by certain mobs remaining alive, but it seems to be either random or just tied to how laggy the dungeon is. And it has been incredibly laggy on all platforms as far as I'm aware. So that's something you might want to look into, Cryptic. Or Decker, I suppose, now. I've switched back to Thaumaturge for AoE. I've heard rumour that Arcanist can be viable in AoE, but I've not yet put in the time to work up a build for it. Oh, there we go. This is one of those instances where the door has been activated whilst there are still a lot of mobs up. Make for much easier speed runs if we could figure out why and what is doing that. And with all the tanking I've done in here, I've still not managed to get that helm. Very disappointing. Last boss. This is another one that I have put a mechanics video up for, but I will again try and explain it a bit more. So this boss will activate as soon as that mob on the right is killed. So if you don't want him to pop too early, make sure you kill the other ones first. On the other hand, if you were doing a speed run and you wanted to pop him quickly, you can just kill that one straight away and he will appear. Now, the general mechanic of this is that the boss is going to blast a load of light into that crystal. That crystal will then blast a load of light out into the mirrors, and the mirrors will then activate and kill you if you're not careful. If you can see, you will be able to see generally which mirrors are going to activate. If it is directly across from you, then you should be able to shift to one side or the other and avoid it unless there are two activated across from you, in which case there will be a very, very slim slither on a pillar. And as you can see, even when you know the mechanics, you can get caught out. There are polarities in here which anyone who's done Tom or MGR or even LOM will probably be familiar with the polarities. If you've got the same, it will blast you away. If you've got different ones, it will pull you together. The Tank Buster is a AoE damaging bomb, kinda like Valindra's one. In fact, exactly the same as Valindra's one, except it's not telegraphed in the same way. So once again, he cleaves into the middle. The crystal activates. Then the mirrors activate. can be a bit chaotic. The mechanics do often seem to get out of sync. There are several different types of curses that he can apply. Some of them are more troublesome than others. Like the green one where you have to move can be incredibly awkward when there's mobs up. As a general rule, we wait until he begins to do a mechanic like the tank buster before we go artifacts. This is because he gets locked in place and will not teleport during those, so you don't end up wasting an artifact call. He shields at 3 different points. One is the initial 10%, then it's 50%, then 20%. So if you do manage to find yourself stood within 2 red lines on the floor, provided there isn't a mirror firing back at you from the other side, that spot will be safe if you're tight in between, because it's the 2 mirrors to the side of you that are activated. Getting pulled together will apply a debuff, but it doesn't actually appear to be doing anything at the minute, so often safer to take it than try and move away from it. If you happen to get the same polarities, then you need to go and stand in the red and get blasted out into a safe point rather than try to find your way to a safe point. That is what we call a holy donut. It's one of Zariel's mechanics that seems to have a much larger hit range than it should. Or it could just be the general issue with this particular boss. In fact, with quite a lot of dungeons, if you dodge too late, it doesn't seem to register the fact that you've moved. Happens in MGR with the mirrors quite a lot as well. You can get some really nasty stacked mechanics going on here. These cleaves that the clones have got up don't go off as far as I know. But the danger with just assuming that it's a safe cleave is that the boss is still around here somewhere cleaving, so you can get caught out. So at 50%, a healer will spawn. That one right there. He doesn't appear to actually do anything to the boss, but he will heal the other mobs. So it's something to watch out for. Once you've got a bit of experience and a good understanding of the mirrors, it is very easy to predict where they're going to fire. Although some of the angles are still a little bit awkward. It is probably a bug, but there are several of these curses that when he repeats them, they don't actually do anything. So if you get a second round of fire under your feet, that doesn't seem to activate. Second round of having to stand still, where you get damaged, often doesn't seem to activate. And the same with the second round of having to move. This whole dungeon does seem a bit buggy. That's what we've come to expect, I suppose. Obviously it will be easier to survive these mitigation blasts when you've got a pally healer. It's just how it goes with those. The midi blast will actually come almost directly after one of those curses drops off. So if you've got a healer who's on the ball, you should be able to survive. Obviously the more death stacks you got, the harder that is as well. When you get these fires under your feet, you ideally want to move it away from the boss, like I did not do there. But if you can stick them into the middle, it means you've got more safe spots on the outside. And we're not entirely sure what the function of these clones are besides something quite useful to get your daily back on. They don't seem to be killable, and they don't seem to do any damage, so I imagine there's something in the lore about them being reflections of the Emperor or something. And he's a very teleporty guy, so like I say, we wait for a mechanic like that donut all the time, Buster. But then sometimes he still disappears. But yeah, he was going into his shield phase there, so I suppose that's more understandable. If you're the less experienced group, then AoE comps could be more useful in here than the single target ones. Something like the Shadowkai Witch, the Mystagogue, potentially the Minotaur, but the problem with the Minotaur is that he will, or he can, end up stacking the mobs on top of the DPS, and those mobs do have AoE, or appear to have AoE abilities that will still cause you damage if they're near you and attacking near you. One of the challenges to break the shield. I have not yet been in a group that has managed to break that shield, so if anyone's got any tips, leave them in the comments. I have been tanking all of those though, so who knows. Maybe it was just missing my DPS to break that shield. Although looking at the current state of that shield, that is probably not the case. Been quite lucky mechanics wise here. Most of the nasty stuff did not pop up at the same time as the mobs. And yep, here it looks like we've got what should be a second round of fire, which is not activating. So no idea if that's a bug or not. I suppose we'll find out in 6 months or so when they put a little note in the patch notes that they fixed something, like they often do. And if you can get down to this point with the DPS mostly without death stacks, then it's generally smooth sailing. Sometimes you seem to get an endless stream of mobs, but not this time, so all good. And I'll give a big shout out to the team. This is all Dreadnoks guild group. We've got Thorski there on the healer, absolutely brilliant player, plays every turn. Pedrino as well, taking his tank out. I know he enjoys it so much. Nikita is a newer member of Dreadnoks, doing a very good job DPSing. And Old Irish is an absolute monster DPS, who's very, very good at pressing buttons. So, GG guys. if you look at the way these reds are trisecting the floor, you can see that there's going to be several safe spots. There they are. Again, quite difficult to see sometimes when they're opposite you. A lot of times there'll be a fractional shift to the left or right. And that's the Arcanist. Leave any questions in the comments, and thanks for watching.